If you've been diagnosed with mesothelioma, it's smart for you to investigate whether you have a legal right to compensation. Not everyone is eligible to file a lawsuit, so understanding who can sue and who can't is critical. Today, I want to walk you through exactly who is eligible to file a mesothelioma lawsuit, what circumstances might prevent you from filing, and what options you have if you can't file a traditional lawsuit. I'm Terry Oppenheimer. I've been writing about mesothelioma and asbestos for the website mesothelioma.net for over a decade. I'm not a lawyer, and you should definitely not consider anything I say legal advice. Rather, I'm hoping to help you understand the basics of mesothelioma litigation eligibility. So, let's start with who can sue for mesothelioma. If a person is diagnosed with a known exposure to asbestos during their lifetime, and you can identify when and where you were exposed to asbestos, there's a good chance you'll be eligible to file a personal injury lawsuit against the companies whose asbestos products caused your exposure and your illness. This applies regardless of how you were exposed. Whether you were exposed occupationally through your job, if you were exposed through secondary exposure by living with someone who worked with asbestos, or if you were exposed through contaminated talc products. In all those cases, you can likely sue. The key is that you have a diagnosis and you can identify an exposure source. If a person with mesothelioma dies before filing a personal injury lawsuit, their family members can file a wrongful death lawsuit. This is typically filed by their spouse, adult children, or the representative of their estate. Wrongful death lawsuits seek compensation for the family's losses, loss of financial support, loss of companionship, funeral expenses, and the pain and suffering that the deceased experienced before death. Even if a person with mesothelioma has already filed a personal injury lawsuit but dies before their case is resolved, the family can continue that lawsuit, and they may be able to add wrongful death claims to it. Family members who develop mesothelioma from secondary exposure can also file their own lawsuits. If you developed mesothelioma from being exposed to asbestos carried into your home, such as handling a family member's asbestos-contaminated work clothes, you have standing to sue the companies whose products or work environment contaminated those clothes. I want to take a break right here and say, if you're finding this helpful, please hit the like and subscribe buttons below. It really helps us get our information in front of more people who need it. And if you have questions or there's a topic you'd like me to address, send me a note in the comment section below. Finally, watch until the end of this video for information about how to access both legal and medical help. Now, let's talk about who might not be able to sue, or who could face complications in attempting to do so. The first complication that every victim of negligent asbestos exposure needs to be aware of is the applicable statutes of limitations. A statute of limitations is a legally imposed deadline for filing a lawsuit. And when it comes to mesothelioma claims, in most states, the statute of limitations is between 1 and 3 years from the date of diagnosis. For wrongful death claims, the amount of time is generally the same, but it usually starts at the date of death. If you miss this deadline, you lose your right to file a lawsuit, period. The court, they're just going to dismiss your case as untimely no matter how strong your proof is, how sick you are, or how much you or your family's been damaged. The merits of your case will mean nothing. That's why it's so critical that you contact an asbestos attorney immediately after being diagnosed. Don't wait months or years. The second complication is workers' compensation exclusivity. In most states, if you were exposed to asbestos in the course of your employment, Workers' compensation might be the only remedy you have against your employer. You can name your employer in a claim for workers' compensation benefits for an asbestos-related disease, but you generally can't sue them directly in court. What you can do, even if you can't sue your employer, is sue the manufacturers of asbestos products and other third parties. With the benefit of your employment history and other biographical information, an experienced asbestos attorney will be able to identify all the companies whose contaminated products you were exposed to, and you'll be eligible to file claims against those companies. The third complication is when an asbestos company has filed a bankruptcy claim or has established an asbestos trust. Many of the companies that manufactured asbestos products, they've gone bankrupt largely due to enormous asbestos-related liabilities. These companies, when they filed for bankruptcy, were required to establish asbestos trust funds for the specific purpose of compensating victims. If the company that exposed you has gone bankrupt, you typically can't sue that company in court. Instead, you file a claim against their trust fund. So the compensation available through these trust funds, it shouldn't be dismissed. There are billions of dollars set aside in these trusts. The process of accessing compensation through a claim against a trust, it's different from direct litigation against a company. Though the amount of compensation is generally less than what's available through a successful lawsuit, the time it takes to be compensated is significantly shorter, and the process is nowhere near as adversarial. In both types of claims, an experienced mesothelioma attorney will be your best resource for identifying all relevant parties, as well as for filing claims on your behalf. The fourth complication is if you've already received a settlement. So, if you previously settled a mesothelioma case and released all claims against all defendants, you generally can't file a new lawsuit based on the same exposure. However, if you settled for a lung cancer case and then you developed a new asbestos-related disease, or you discover new exposure sources you didn't know about during the first case, you may be able to file additional claims. The fifth complication is the inability to identify an exposure source. To file a successful mesothelioma lawsuit, you need to be able to identify when, where, and how you were exposed to asbestos. If you have mesothelioma but have absolutely no idea how or when you were exposed, and an attorney's investigation doesn't reveal the answer to those questions, it becomes very difficult to file a lawsuit. But the good news is that an experienced mesothelioma attorney will be skilled at investigating exposure history. Even if you don't immediately recall working with asbestos or being exposed to it, an attorney can conduct a detailed work and life history investigation that identifies products used at your job sites or that were present in your home environment. They can consult with industrial hygienists about the impact of your level of exposure to asbestos. Don't assume you can't sue just because you're not sure about your exposure. Talk to an attorney first. The sixth complication is when service members and retired service members file claims having to do with their military service. If you were exposed during military service, you generally can't sue the federal government for that exposure. That's because of sovereign immunity. However, you can sue the manufacturers of asbestos products used by the military. You can also file for VA benefits for asbestos-related diseases, and that doesn't require proving anybody's at fault, just that you were exposed during your service and developed your disease as a result. There are definitely some situations where people think they can sue, but doing so presents real, often insurmountable challenges. For example, if your only exposure was environmental, like if you lived near a site you think might have been contaminated with asbestos, but you never worked there or had direct contact, it could be more difficult to prove because environmental exposure is typically less intense than occupational exposure. Still, In communities with known heavy contamination like Libby, Montana, or Ambler, Pennsylvania, those cases have been very successful. If you were exposed to asbestos in a foreign country, litigation can be complicated by jurisdictional issues. However, if you were working for a U.S. company or exposed to products manufactured by U.S. companies, you may still have claims in U.S. courts. Here's what you should do if you think you might have a mesothelioma claim, but you're not sure if you can sue. Right off the bat, contact an experienced mesothelioma attorney for a free consultation. Don't wait to see if you qualify. Let an attorney make that determination. These consultations are free with no obligation. Second, gather any information you have about your work history, your military service, and any other potential exposure sources. Write down everywhere you worked, what years you worked there, what your job duties were, and any products or materials you remember working with. Also, write down what you know about your family members' exposures. Third, don't assume you can't file just because you face one or even more of the complications I mentioned. Many of those complications can be worked around or addressed by an experienced attorney. Statutes of limitations are real and absolute, but most other obstacles I've mentioned, they have solutions. So, who can sue for mesothelioma? Anyone diagnosed with mesothelioma who can identify exposure sources, family members filing wrongful death claims, and people who develop mesothelioma from secondary exposure. Who might face complications? People who've missed statutes of limitations, those whose exposure was solely through employers covered by workers' comp exclusivity, those exposed by bankrupt companies, and those who previously settled and released claims. Many of these complications have solutions. The only way to be certain about whether you can sue is to talk to an experienced mesothelioma attorney. Visit mesothelioma.net and fill out our form, or call 1-800-692-8608 to speak with a patient advocate who can connect you with attorneys for a free case evaluation. As for me, remember to post questions below, and I'll see you next time.